Welcome to another GCBASIC Insight video. This is about a new feature. It's actually about GC Studio and the compiler and how they interact. We're introducing a new feature called .build. So let's recap. GCBASIC is a compiler. It's an open source compiler for PIC, AVR, and LGT microcontrollers, supporting 1,500, just under 1,500 microcontrollers, and it's a cross-platform with common code translation. This this cross-platform is what we're going to impact some of that. So we've made a small change, but really improve the workflows. So new functionality. New functionality was introduced to change 1538. If you haven't got 1538, then or before that, it doesn't apply. After that, you'll see this. So GCBASIC now supports using a .build folder in structure. And that means that we create, during the compilation process, a folder called .build. And so what's the change? There's two command line switches that are added to the compiler, /do/AO, and they tell the compiler to put the output into a different folder, the .build folder. So if you don't put those, nothing happens. There is no change. So these switches allow GC Studio to place the debugger related files into a dedicated build directory instead of mixing them up in the project root. And this is very important as the compiler is now generating more files for the debugger. It's starting to clutter the project directory. So these two new switches are needed. This matters because we need to produce more files. The debugger output files, the lfile.s, list, debug, etc. were all being generated in the same directory as your user source. And it really was getting extremely cluttered in that folder. So the change within the GC Studio and the automated build processes had to clean up all that. And it was becoming extremely difficult to find your actual source file. I used a filter, but really that was masking the issue. So this new change enables us to work with a build configuration, either debug or release, to give us clean separation. So GC Studio and the compiler will redirect all the generated files into a separate isolated folder. The build scripts and automation pipeline that you create will become cleaner. It's more predictable because you can just delete a folder and the whole thing will go. You can keep your home directory, your project directory clean. And switching between different release levels becomes a lot easier. And all the commands in GC Studio support the .build folder. I'm going to show you this. Now, what's the impact here? After 1538, if you're using an alternative IDE or the command line, there is no impact. It doesn't matter. It will just generate the files as it was previously, and you'll just have to deal with the mess. So for SynWrite, there is no operational differences. All the files are in exactly the same place. It's only when you're starting to use the IDE GC code with the debugger this really impacts. So why don't we have a little look at what's going on? I'm going to connect to a separate machine through an RDP session. Just going to bring it up. And hopefully it's sitting there. Oh, here we go. On my screen now, we'll have a quick zoom around, shall we? I've got a program, a source program called, there it is, it's just a really simple source program with a comment, and it's called test.gcb. It's in a folder that I called change 1538. There is no filter set. Inside of here, inside the list here, there is no filter. And inside the actual folder, which I will show you, here is the source file. This is the folder on my machine. So if I come back into here and I compile something, and I press the compile button, because you can see it, it creates a folder in this listing here called test.build. So it's always your file name and then the actual the .build folder. And if we look at the bottom of the compiler, it said it's successfully compiled it in green. I'm going to come back to these colors in another video, by the way. But let's have a look what's happened over here. In this folder, the source folder, I've still got my GCB file, but in here, I've got 16 files now because we're starting to see the development of the compiler to with greater capability. Those files are down there because there's quite a few of them. And if we used the old compiler method before 1538, they would all be inside of my root folder. So if I come back into I look at my project here, I go back to the root where my project is, my source code, test.gcb is just sitting there on its own. I'll just move my camera across. I'm going to press function key F4. Can I get both of those on the screen at the same time? Doubt it. Function key F4, press the clean, and inside of my folder, I've lost that whole build folder. It's gone. So you want the hex file, take it out, put it in the release folder, but it cleans it up. The clean command is extremely clever. So, oh, I hear you shout. What about if I'm using SynWrite? Well, let's have a look at SynWrite, shall we? Here's SynWrite with the same source program. And if you don't believe me, I'm going to put a little comment in here. Look. Comment in lowercase, look, or command. Go back into that GCBASIC, so into the other ID, and it's definitely the same file, look, okay? Because I'm actually editing. I'm editing it here, so I'm looking at the same source file. If I now compile that by pressing the hex key, it compiles it with no issues, and it's put all the files in with my source program. I can't clean, there is no clean command in SynWrite, so I have to go through and find my source. There's my hex. All that still works exactly as it was previously. SynWrite is the same. It just produces more files that you're going to have to deal with. But I'm not going to change SynWrite. That's the legacy ID of 3 years ago. So inside of, let me move slide across. Inside of the IDE, I can press function key F4, clean the solution, and it has cleaned up that folder that was previously cluttered because that's the way to do it. And so, operationally, you don't see any change apart from this little trick. Let me compile a file, function key F6, it's created the build directory, and I can look at any of the source files in here as I did before. But if I look at the assembly, there's the assembly file, and then I want to recompile it, I can just press function key F6. I can just recompile that file, and it will automatically find the GCB file and recompile it. Hence, it just disappeared for a second. So I can go into my source file here, GCB. Let me just put something in here. I'll put an error in, exclamation mark. That's a good error to put in, isn't it? Yeah. I'll put an exclamation mark. Let's pretend I've made some edits in there. I'll go back to my source file, my ASM file. Click, click. If I can get onto it, there we go. Compile it. I can compile the file, look, the source GCB file from any of the files inside of the build directory. It gives you greater flexibility. Let me reassure you that I'm just changing screens here. It did come up with the syntax error on that line, which it should have done. If I look at that source, I'll go back to that source, get rid of that, go back to my assembly. If you want to know how to do that, just hold the pointer above the file name and just rotate your mouse. Look at that. Function key F6 or press the hex key, and voila, it will compile. So it has great benefit. And now if I want to clean up, I can go function key F4, clean up, and it will clean. This will become unknown because the file has disappeared. And let me just shut that down, shut that file down, get rid of that. I'm in the wrong editor. There we go. F4 and clean, and see what it's done to our folder structure, shall we? Move across to the screen. It's tidied it up. .build is a new feature. So, new feature is called .build. Get back to my enjoy.